Hello everyone, and welcome back to E2E. It's been a little while, hasn't it? Unless you're binge watching this, in which case, just ignore that. Anyways, today is a big day for us, because it's all about Flux networks. This is a journey that's going to take us through extended crafting, Ender IO, Draconic Evolution, and... wait a minute, immersive engineering? That's still relevant? I don't know, that's what the script says. Anyways, let's get on with it, because we have a flux ton of stuff to do today. Oh, come on, that one was good. In between episodes, I terraformed some of the floating islands. I think the extra details actually really make them pop, and they look so much better now. This one here is basically just a giant tree at this point. Beyond that, I also finished up our wall, which, while not the best, is fine because again, it's background scenery. And then I added a room for Ender IO machines, which we're going to be getting into today. In fact, let's get started with that. As a quick disclaimer, some of these segments were recorded with older audio settings, so they might sound a little different. The main gate to get into Flux networks is the Flux core. These are made specifically by crushing a dimensional transceiver inside a sag mill. We'll worry about the transceiver in just a second. Right now, let's look at how we make the mill. All of these items are really easy. The limiting factor here is that the simple machine chassis requires titanium aluminide plates. And if we were to request one, you'll see that what we're missing is titanium. The tooltip for titanium tells us that we can get this through the advanced metallurgic fabricator, or we can get rutile ore on other planets. Honestly though, I don't like either of those options. We're gonna get our titanium in a third way. The excavator is an immersive engineering machine that can mine up ores from the overworld. Each chunk is just given an ore vein that it slowly uses up, and these veins can include rutile. Before you can even use the excavator, you'll want to put down a core sample drill, give it some power, and right-click it. After a little animation plays, it should return a core sample. In our case, this is cinnabar. What we're looking for is a bauxite vein that gives us rutile ore. Since that's not what we wanted, we just move to a new chunk and try again. Okay. It has been a long while of me running around exploring chunks, but finally, we have gotten a bauxite vein. For some reason, the core samples are invisible, but as long as the actual items are there, I don't care. With the excavator built, all we should need to do is give it some power, and somewhere for the items to get output. You can see that it's picking up ores and putting them into the shulker, and while the majority of this will be aluminum, which we don't care about, some of it will be rutile. Now, this is rather slow at generating ores, but I've found a way to, well, cheese this. If you time in a bottle this central block here, and then quickly reassemble it, you can see that it is now going at warp speed. Anyways, I'll chunk load this area and be right back. While we wait for our excavator to do its job, I thought I'd show you a quick little automation that I've set up. Over here in the tunnels, I've made a little offshoot with this system right here. It might look really confusing, but it's simple. Grains of Infinity are an important Ender IO component. Can only be done by setting bedrock on fire or covering it with fire water. I chose to go the fire route. What we have here is an interface that provides materials to a crafter. This will just make flint and steel infinitely. These get used by this mechanical user on bedrock, and when the fire wears out and grains of infinity spawn, they get picked up by this vacuum hopper and sent back to the interface. The only other component is this level emitter that tells it to turn off past a certain point. And in the meantime, our excavator actually just reached a stack of rutile. For what we're needing today, this will be more than enough. Now that we have a stack of rutile ore, we can quickly crush it, and take the 2 stacks of titanium and smelt them. Now we have titanium, and therefore can request our simple machine chassis. This should unlock a new chapter, and we can make our simple sag mill. I'm also going to immediately make a second machine chassis so that I can immediately make a simple alloy smelter. The reason I made it is because we will need it to make these organic dyes, which are exclusive to this alloy smelter. And they're actually pretty important, because they're what allow us to make the different tiers of machine chassis. But just so I don't lose you, let's take a quick step back. The item that we're after today is the flux core, which gets made in a sag mill with a dimensional transceiver. This guy might not look like much, but it's actually a huge rabbit hole. The ender crystal is going to need us to make a soul binder, while the ender resonator will need a slice and splice. Both of these machines require that dye blend that I just mentioned, so why don't we get on that? Thankfully for us, the alloy smelter is actually pretty quick. All we have left is to make solarium, which is pretty easy, crush it down, and if we combine that with our dyes and some quartz, we can make Soul Attune Dye Blend, enabling us to request the different tier of machine chassis. With this, we can make our slice and splice and our soul binder. The slice and splice needs an axe and shears, but otherwise we can just put in our items and get immediately the ender resonator. In the other machine, our ender crystal will need vibrant crystals and captured enderman in soul vials. If you go to the end, this one's really not that hard. This one does require experience, but given that we are at over 1,000 levels, it doesn't really matter much. At this point, we have almost everything we need, except for these octadic capacitors, which you might think aren't that bad. 2 charged draconium blocks. If this were regular draconium, not a problem. Draconium spawns in the deep dark, and even though it is rare, we don't need that many. In fact, we can smelt it all up and make draconium blocks right now. No, the trouble with these is that they need to be charged in combination crafting, and this is not as straightforward as it looks. Making these components will require a carpenter and a lot of black iron ingots. We're also going to need liquefacted coal, unusual ingredient, but with that done, we can just add the recipe and make some of the pedestals. All in all, we'll be needing 24 pedestals, although if this were the only recipe we cared about, 5 would have been enough. 4 to make the crafting core, and 1 to put this extra draconium on. 24, however, is the number that you need to make the fusion crafting core recipe, which has 20 separate inputs. It's a little much. Anyways, we have our recipe now, so all we should need to give it is the 4 pedestals. We'll need to cast out 1 more osmiridium ingot, but that's no problem. And now all we're missing is these crystalline components, which should be fine. It's just black iron, glowstone, redstone, and crystalline ingots. Wonder where these are made. And welcome to the problem. In order to make these crystalline components, we need to use the elite crafting table. And this recipe is no joke. Luckily, I've been preparing for this moment. Thanks to the Empower automation from last episode, the hardened cell frames are on autocraft. Thanks to our passive setups from before, the fluxed phytogrow is ready to go. The elite components are a breeze. A while back, we automated signalum cell frames. The only ingredient that we're missing in this whole picture is the mana dust. And we just got into Botania last episode. All we need is mana powder and some mana diamonds, and we can make 4 mana dust. Of course, this tier 3 crafting table does need to be made in an advanced crafting table, but these are really easy. All this is black iron combined with emeralds or diamonds or gold. It's super simple. And with all of these ingredients, we can make our tier 3 crafting table. Sadly, not a quest. We'll be able to make the 6 crystalline ingots that we need, the 3 crystalline components, and at long last, our crafting core. Like I mentioned last episode, it's actually a direct drop-in over here at our Empowerer setup. We add in the crafting core, replace the display stands with pedestals. I'll be adding the rest later, don't worry. Now we should be able to put a draconium block here in the middle. Okay, I've had to change it up a little, and probably I'll have to change the whole area a little bit more. But now, if we put a block on a pedestal and one in the middle, and there we go. Charged draconium blocks. With these draconium blocks, we can make our octadic capacitors, and finally, the dimensional transceiver. All that's left to do now is to crush it down. Apparently, very slowly. Time in a bottle to the rescue. And there we have them, flux cores. At this point, we can set a recipe for the flux dust, and we can recursively craft more flux cores. This recipe means that they go from being an extremely expensive item to an almost free item. Combine that with the fact that the flux plugs and the flux points are extremely cheap, and it will be really obvious why this is the best power system in the game. Welcome back. I know it hasn't been a long time for you, but it has for me. After that last segment, I got a little under the weather, so I've just been doing minor stuff around the base while waiting to be able to record again. To quickly catch you up on what I did, the first thing was set up the entire combination crafting room. We now have 20 pedestals and can craft any of the combination recipes if AE2 allowed for it. We'll get back to that later. Then, I cleaned up the front of the building and gave it a much nicer look, much more cohesive with the rest. It matches the interiors pretty well, and I especially like this 3D leaf effect. It's a little weird up close, but from further away, it actually looks very nice. I really like the effect, and I'm going to be using it a lot more. I've also moved our mob farm over to the industrial foregoing area. It's kind of hard to see against the pitch black glass, but in here, mobs are being killed very quickly, and being used to feed our mob duplicator, which, as you can tell, is making wither skeletons. Also, more on that later. Finally, what I've been doing is setting up ender porcupines and flux networks for all of our machines. This helps keep visible cabling much nicer. To demonstrate this, let's go upgrade the forestry room. At the moment, it looks like this, and the cabling below, well, it kind of sucks. In order to fix this mess, we can put down an ender porcupine below, sync it up to the carpenter, and give it water and power this way. This allows us to get rid of a ton of these ugly cables, but there's still one problem, which is that the recipes here are really slow. At this stage, it's not gonna cut it. What will cut it is the advanced carpenter. This multi-block can do all of the recipes a carpenter can, but much faster, and it is about time that we invest in it. This is the list of items that we need. And the only thing that will be truly new is modularium, the crafting material for modular machines. Now that we can make empowered crystals, there is nothing gating us from it, so let's go do it. We'll need a lot of platinum. After setting up a few missing recipes, we can request modularium, and with it, we can make the advanced carpenter blueprint. Getting this multi-block will require some new things like machine vents, gearboxes. We'll need all sorts of input hatches. We're even going to need to melt down cryothium. Now that we have all the items we're going to need, we can actually get a preview of this in-world and place it down. We can fill it out layer by layer. Machine controller in the center. And complete the structure. If we open the machine controller, you can now see that it says the structure is that of an advanced carpenter, and this machine blueprint acts as programming. This is the hardware, this is the software. And this machine actually presents a great opportunity for us to put our ender porcupines to use. Right now, the item input for it, for example, is back here in this corner that's really not very convenient. So what we can instead do is put up porcupines beneath it and pump items into the porcupines themselves. We can give the fluid input just an infinite source of water, and now that we've given the fluid input water, the energy input power, All we need is an interface on the item input, which we can even do remotely. And with the output connected to an ender chest, look at how clean all of this wiring is. If I had to do all of this stuff up there, it would have been a mess, but right here, everything is nice and compartmentalized. And now that we have this nice clean setup, let's see how fast it actually is. Now that is good. This is a huge improvement over these slow carpenters, and I'm so happy with it that we're gonna make another. Not another carpenter, but instead an advanced Thermionic fabricator. It's gonna really help us round out the forestry room. Okay, it took a little bit of troubleshooting, but we got the multi-block formed, and we can tell it that it is an advanced Thermionic fabricator. It also likes to catch fire, don't worry. Down below, it's a similar story to the other one, only here there's a little bit more going on. The recipes here don't need water, but instead liquid glass. So, this central interface is stocking sand, sending only the sand into the melter, which is then sending it into the fluid input. The rest of the recipes work like normal. And in this case, normal means really fast. There's still a couple recipes I need to put in, but honestly, these have been a huge upgrade already. So let's move on to the next thing, and keep this upgrade streak going. Next up on our list of improvements is going to be a wither builder. You remember that I mentioned that we were farming skeletons for a purpose, right? All of those skulls are going to get used to build withers in here, and have them crushed, as usual, by a mob crusher. The wither builder itself is pretty easy, and all that we need to do is provide it with skeleton skulls and soul sand. Before we start summoning any of them, though, we want to make sure that they're contained, because they will blow up. For that, we can make some reinforced obsidian, and combine it with dark glass to make wither-proof glass. Now, we can build it a little enclosure. If we make this active on any signal, the wither will get created. That's a few more than I was hoping for. But they do not blow up the structure. But they do not blow up the structure. Oh shit. They do, however, blow up the mob crusher. In order to avoid that happening again, we're going to put an entity detector here and connect it with a redstone conduit to the wither builder. We can also replace our poor fallen mob crusher. Now that we have an entity detector sending a redstone signal only when there are no monsters, and the wither builder only being active on a signal, let's see if this works. We do indeed seem to only be spawning one at a time, which is what we wanted. We can also add a level emitter that will turn off when we have above 64 nether stars. Well, let's make it 128 nether stars, just to be sure. So now, when either of these conditions is met, either there is an existing wither, or we have enough stars, it will turn off and we can let our mob farm catch up. Actually, slight issue with this design, we want to set this to only work without redstone, and flip both of these. Otherwise, this would send a continuous redstone on signal, and it would spawn a ton of withers. Now that we have withers automated, let's move on to something a little newer. As you saw earlier, extended crafting gives us access to these bigger recipes. As you might know, AE2 patterns can only support 9 items and 3 outputs. And while I'm no genius, I'm pretty sure that this is more than 9 items. In order to deal with this, we're gonna have to get into packaged auto. In order to use packaged auto, you're going to want an unpackager, a packager, and somewhere a package recipe encoder. The packager and unpackager pair will need power. Inside your recipe encoder, you can set a recipe that is more than 3x3. In this case, let's use the crystal tin ingots that we just made. You'll want to put 2 package recipe holders up here and then save it. One really quick thing to note is that despite the crystal tin ingot recipe being in a much bigger crafting table, it's only 5 ingredients, meaning that it can all be accomplished in one package. If I were to set the recipe for something with a crazy amount of items, you can see that now it has 3 different packages, because each of these can still only handle 9 items. Anyways, let's not get distracted. We are making crystalline ingots. We can take our recipe holders out and put one of them in the unpackager and one of them in the packager. If you want to do more than one recipe per packager and unpackager pair, you can just move on to a new recipe slot. That's besides the point right now. One in the unpackager, one in the packager. Now you can see that our crystalline ingots can be auto-crafted, once I remember to set a regular pattern for nether star nuggets. So let's say I want 10 crystalline ingots. If I request them, it shows all the items we need, and you can see that all of them get packaged in the packager. Now that the items are all packaged, they've been sent to the unpackager, which will just put them into any nearby inventory. Throwing them into a chest isn't particularly useful, but we do want it to put them into an automation interface, which also needs power. If you put a table underneath it, and then place the recipe in it, you can now go up here and press Save Recipe. Because the ingredients are there, it started to make our crystalline ingots. And by the way, you do need to have the physical items. It can't be done from JEI. It's actually so annoying. But with this, we're actually most of the way to fully automatic ingots. If we request them, items are going to get packaged, then unpackaged, sent into the automation interface, which will craft our ingots, and really all that's left is to extract the items into our interface. You can see that the craft has completed, and we have 16 crystalline ingots. It's a bit of a messy system and has a lot of limitations. For example, each automation interface can only handle one recipe, meaning that all of the ones that we want to automate have to be their own table. This is especially bad when you'll notice that the ultimate crafting table has 30 recipes. But complaining about it isn't going to do us much good. Let's look at setting this up in a more permanent location. This is the little room I've built for it, and we'll want to expand it later, but it's a good start for now. We can put down all of our automation interfaces, and the extended crafting tables beneath them. The unpackagers go on top of the automation interfaces, and then afterwards all you need is, well, all of this. It might look like a lot, but I promise it's actually pretty simple. Right here, flux point, power to the unpackagers and the automation interfaces, both of which need it. This guy right here, wireless connector, going straight down into a wireless connector. All of these wireless connectors are connected together and then connect to another wireless connector. Am I repeating myself? These are basically just to avoid having ME cables coming up here. That's all. They're all joined together here and then connect backwards to a main AE2 line. Finally, these ender porcupines here are just connected up to the automation interface, so that they can send their items down into the regular interface and back to AE2. So we should now, in theory, be able to automate any extended crafting recipe, minus the ultimate crafting ones, for obvious reasons. As I mentioned earlier, each automation interface can only do one recipe. And even though I could spam like a million of these, I feel like it's better if we go cautiously. At the end of the day, we only want to automate what we need, and here in the basic crafting section, for example, there's really not much. I'm not going to be needing many creative building wands and void ore miner controllers. These are things that can be made as one-offs. We're also going to be able to use extended crafting and packaged auto to fully automate all of the combination crafting. I mentioned earlier that some of these require up to 20 different inputs, so AE2 can definitely not handle that alone. None of these items are immediately relevant though, so we'll get to that later. For now, there is one more thing that we need to do. Well, okay, technically two things. The first is just to show you that I've set up the Ender IO machines over here in this little room. We've got our sag mill, alloy smelter, the soul binder with a experience obelisk feeding it XP that I just give it myself. It's got 800 levels and it is going to last absolutely forever. And then below we just have recipes that get sent in, completed, extracted out, back to AE2. Same story for this slice and splice. Technically these items have durability, but it's 1,000 crafts before they're relevant, so I'm not too worried. The other thing I'll point out is these powered spawners back here. These are set to capture mode, and we have one for villagers, witches, shulkers, and endermen. If you give them a soul vial, they will capture one of that mob, which we can then use in the soulbinder recipes. The enticing crystal, ender crystal, prescient crystal, and sentient ender are the items that we care about from it. In order to make these powered spawners, all you need is a regular spawner, can be any mob, and a soul vial of the required mob. Combine those in a soulbinder, and then combine them with a powered spawner in an anvil to set the type. So that's just what I did for all 4 of these guys. Although I was having no luck finding a witch, so I had to get creative in order to spawn one. Anyways, now onto the truly final thing. And of course, the last thing that we need to do is add some names to our sieves. We have Rory Rules, Slim Pie 2003, X Lightspeed, Firepower MC, Amethyst, WTF Juan, Strider 7000, Phantom Fox, Melonhead WT, that is indeed a melon, Blue Diamond, Harampali Joshua, Flavio 096, Sierlove, I Need Cure, Mephius 8084, Grim Arkin, Useless Force, Othalisk, Scruffy Anemone, Shiny Jesus, Statk, and Nanobites. Big thank you to all of you who continue to ensure that I have quadrillions of resources. Your slavery is appreciated. And, of course, thank you all for watching the video. I know it's been a little bit of a messy one. You can probably tell that I started a different series in between recording some of this episode, but hopefully the next one will be a lot smoother. Thank you all for watching, and of course, stay cool.